So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this web talk on security policy in Eastern Europe and Germany's role within the European Union and NATO. My name is Patrick Waltz. I am responsible for the civic education program of the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for Freedom in the states of Hessen and Rheinland-Pfalz. I have organized this event for the foundation in cooperation with our longtime partner, the Atlantische Akademie Rheinland-Pfalz, and would like to thank its director, Dr. David Sirakov, for supporting us, and also together with our Hessen-based liberal foundation, the Karl-Hermann-Flach-Stiftung, and I would like to thank its chairman, Dr. Frank Blechschmidt. The event was originally planned as more of a general discussion on what the security policy of the European Union and NATO looks like in respect to Eastern Europe and what the expectations are towards Germany. Germany used to be a frontline state during the Cold War and finds itself happily relegated to the rear echelons. Now, the more recent member states of the European Union and the NATO, the Baltic States, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia find themselves in a more exposed position. And this situation hasn't really been acknowledged by the Western European states. Also the US has shifted its focus away from Europe during the last decade. Now, a leader of the Belarusian opposition is in exile in Lithuania. And Lukashenko, the authoritarian ruler of Belarus, has partially mobilized his forces in the western border to Poland and Lithuania and asked Russia for assistance, claiming that he is threatened by outside forces. And so this more theoretical discussion we had planned in the spring of this year suddenly got very real. I'm glad to introduce our expert panel who will discuss this topic with us. I'd like to begin with Dr. Žygimantas Paviljonis, the former Lithuanian ambassador to the US and now a member of the Lithuanian parliament. Dr. Paviljonis, I'm honored to have you with us this evening.
Thank you so much.
Then let me welcome the retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, the former commanding general of US Army Europe, and now the Pershing Chair of the Center of European Policy Analysis. Mr. Hodges, a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
And finally, my colleague, Jeroen Dobber, our foundation's European Affairs Manager and the head of Security Hub in Brussels. Mr. Dobber, Jeroen, I am glad you could join us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And the talk will be moderated by the journalist, Dr. Markus Pindur, who is correspondent for security policy for the Deutschlandfunk. I wish us all a spirited talk, and Mr. Pindur, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I'm really glad to be able to be in such a great surrounding here with those people here sitting next to me virtually. I would like to start with a couple of questions for Žygimantas Paviljonis. We are all looking to Belarus right now, and the Baltic states have been in a peculiar security situation, geographically and politically exposed to Russia, unlike most other NATO states. In what way does the current situation in Belarus affect your security?
Well, it's a long story. Of course, we've been able to catch the last train into EU and NATO enlargement some 15 years ago. And immediately when we entered EU, we tried to put Belarus on EU radars. Honestly, I was a deputy foreign minister. I remember we counted Belarus was maybe number 100. We managed to put it into maybe number 20. But unfortunately, we didn't manage to convince EU and NATO to look seriously into situation, because different EU leaders continued in different ways support Lukashenko regime. Before Lithuanian or Baltic entry into EU, we didn't have even direct assistance to civil society. All EU money and support was channeled directly to Lukashenko regime, and we had different attempts of civil society to regain democratic control of the country. But unfortunately, after all those attempts, EU had some little sanctions for a few years, but dismantled it, and Lukashenko was very skillful in dividing and ruling the West together with chief supporters from Kremlin and actually China, that is very present in Belarus. We've been still enthusiastic that we might infect EU with this freedom or democracy thinking, but we suffered first serious blows in Bucharest NATO summit, where my president, together with Polish late President Kaczynski, and I believe, remember 7 or 8 presidents there, were trying to convince Chancellor Merkel and French and other presidents that membership action plans have to be extended to NATO, to Ukraine and Georgia. And as we know, then big EU leaders and NATO leaders said no, because that would provoke Russia. They were very wrong, because actually our weakness then provoked Russia, and we see immediately the results of Occupy Georgia in 2008. Then I was the only deputy foreign minister trying to wake up EU, saying this is a Munich of 21st century. If Putin remains unpunished, because we didn't even introduce any sanctions to Russia, we just continued with then Obama's reset to shake hands of Putin. And already then with President Adamkus, we warned 6 years before invasion into Crimea that next will be Crimea and Ukraine. Well, it seems we've been right. Then the world started to wake up. But now the same is happening in Belarus. To be honest, this is very serious. This is something that happened in Lithuania 30 years ago when we revolted against Soviet Union. It was massive national revolt. It is exactly what we see in Belarus. According to our opinion polls, even before so-called elections, we already saw that the national leader, as she calls itself, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, will win the elections. We had all proofs that election was stolen. According to our independent analysis, Lukashenko won maybe by, 20-30% maximum, but he lost the elections with no international observers, with a huge force used now in the streets, with people killed, at least 3 already confirmed, with thousands of people imprisoned. Well, he resists, and we are in dialogue with Berlin saying, look, wake up. We still remember German appeals 30 years ago to Lithuania, stay with Gorbachev, do not revolt, stay in Soviet Union. Gorbachev is so nice. This is time not to make the same mistake. We didn't listen then to Germans or French. We did what we do, and we entered the EU and NATO, and we actually happy. I have 4 kids. I'm ambassador, member of parliament. Now, please don't do the same mistake with Belarus. Not only introduce sanctions to those criminals who stolen the election, but please demand new elections. We in Lithuanian parliament yesterday, we had a plenary session on Belarus, and we called Lukashenko as illegitimate leader of Belarus because the election was clearly stolen. And we are calling now EU to push for new elections, because what they demand, the Belarusians, is not geopolitical choice. It's not so serious like in Ukraine and Georgia. They do not demand EU or NATO membership. They just demand democracy and freedom and possibility to have their own right to choose their own leaders and their own direction. For example, they think that union with Russia that is so much professed by Lukashenko is illegitimate because nobody voted for it. They don't have a legitimate parliament. Or another little example that makes us very nervous, they just launched a nuclear power plant 30 kilometers from Vilnius, Kremlin built, Rosatom built. Nobody wants it in Belarus, nobody wants it in Lithuania, but they are creating those security threats. And with democracy, it would never happen. So this is our interest. If we really want to live safe in the region, to support the Belarusian people, because if we are truly Europeans, if we believe our constitutional values, if look to me, okay, I'm Christian Democrat. I was raised by Junge Union. You know, I still remember my trainings in Berlin. You know, they created a good product. But if you really believe in those values that Germany was created with, support them in Belarus now. Don't make wrong choices. Don't shake hands with Putin. Don't negotiate with Putin on the future of Belarus. Support the Belarusian people, and they will make the right choice. And in decade or so, you will see happy 10 millions of Europeans, you know, going maybe Ukrainian, maybe even Baltic way, trading with German and other businesses, you know, creating security, and never ever waging war with neighbors. That is happening, unfortunately, right now.
I think we all admire your optimism, Zigis. What do you think we should do as the European Union to support the freedom and democracy movement in Belarus? What is realistic?
Well, I was expecting the conclusions of European Council that was today actually happening. I'm still waiting for a statement of EU president about that. Unfortunately, what I see is just sanctions. Well, sanctions is a reaction. We will and we should, of course, punish by individual sanctions those who stolen the election, those who beated the people or even killed the people. But it will not open the bright side of it. The bright side of it: new elections, new internationally observed, OSCE and other institutions approved elections, where we would have different people. Lukashenko has to go. He's a criminal, to be honest. And we should have Belarusian people support the democratic change in that country. Also help build them civil society, even help build them information flows. They don't have even information what is happening in the country, except some bright Nexta or other Telegram channels. Internet is being closed. They have complete propaganda. What if with German foundations we might help them to get this information about the reality objective? What about students? In Vilnius in exile, we have European Humanities University, Belarusian University with 3,000 souls educated by European diploma. What about, German scholarships and kind of investing into future democratic leaders? I repeat again, you invested into me. I was raised like Christian Democrat, and now I'm international secretary of this party. So what about our leaders? Because if we don't do it, Russia will do it for us. Russia is now supporting Lukashenko heavily. They might also participate in elections, and you might have some kind of Armenian or, I don't know, Central Asian scenario in there.
How likely is it that Russia, that Putin, let's say Putin, will simply accept the outcome of a democratic election? I think that is rather unlikely.
Well, it is unlikely because, Lukashenko was spreading a lot of rumors that Democrats in the streets of Belarus are Russian financed. But we knew from the beginning that this is nonsense. Putin is very afraid of democracy and reforms. And if that democracy virus is spreading, he's just afraid to lose his own power. But what can he do against majority of Belarusian people when you have those protests in every city in Belarus, and they are not fighting for some geopolitical change. They just say free election, please. We are tired with dictator who is stealing our votes. We just want freedom. There is a new generation of Belarusians who've been growing in YouTubes and Facebooks. They think like us, like Germans or Lithuanians. They have nothing to do with this Soviet-style propaganda Lukashenko and Putin is using it in their own countries. They just want to live like us. So we have to support that change.
The aspirations of the Belarus people, I think, are quite clear right now. It remains to be seen what is going to happen and what Putin has on his mind. I mean, as we see in the Ukraine, he certainly cannot hold up this process forever, but he can disturb it in very, very dangerous ways. What do you think? What's your answer to that strategic challenge, Sigis?
Well, it's not about taking sides. Well, it's about, of course, pushing Putin out from any even thoughts about kind of military or other excursions that he's usually doing in August, like he did it 12 years ago in Georgia. So for this, we really appreciate, German or your chancellor's involvement, talking with him and pushing him out from here. But from the other side, we just need to support the democracy. If we are EU, if we really believe in what we are, and I also want to emphasize this is exactly German role, because, well, of course, Americans are always ready to support different kind of changes, but I think more active role of America in this case would make an argument for Russia to show it as geopolitical game. And if a soft European diplomacy, building civil society, helping with elections, demanding release of political prisoners who are in thousands there. I just got photos of those released people. They are completely beaten without teeth. Some of them killed. We have 95 people disappeared without knowledge. Yeah, this is outrageous. This is happening on the borders of EU and NATO. So at least soft but strong diplomacy, demanding Lukashenko to step down, because he's going against any international practices possible, and respecting the will of people. What choice they will make? Actually, a lot of them are very Russia friendly. They speak Russian, but whatever choice they make, it will not be aggressive. It will be democratic. And as I said in the beginning, democracy usually do not wage wars. They do not build reactors against each other. They just want to live peacefully and happily.
I think basically we all agree with you, Zigmantas. Let me ask now Ben what he thinks, how likely a forceful reaction from Washington to this crisis in Belarus he thinks is.
Well, Marcus, thank you. Obviously, following an expert diplomat like Zigis, who especially has the boots on the ground sort of sense of things, I would agree with much of what he just said. And I would also say that Lithuania has been a leader from the beginning on this. They really have led inside the European Union and inside NATO and in the region. So my hat is off to Lithuania. Where I might slightly disagree is I'm disappointed that the American president has not been involved. I've heard nothing from the White House. I mean, it's not helpful that my president is frankly not real clear and strong consistently about Kremlin's malign behavior. And so I thought it would have been appropriate if the president would have come out strong and said the following things. So number one was support the EU, of course. Number two, our ambassador should already be there. I mean, we finally, after 10 years, and I think the Trump administration deserves credit to finally attempt to normalize relationship and get an ambassador back into Minsk. Putting your ambassador there does not equate to an endorsement of President Lukashenko. But if we want to be part of the coordinated diplomatic effort, if we want to be able to convey clearly diplomatic messages, you need a recognized distinguished ambassador, much the way we have such a great, Zigis was such a great ambassador, and frankly, Germany's ambassador to the United States, Emily Haber. So that needs to happen. My president, of course, should be calling for an end to the violence there. He should also join the European Union in calling for new and fair elections observed by OSCE and other appropriate international organizations. And we should also join the call to tell the Kremlin to stay out, to respect the wishes of the people of Minsk, of Belarus. I do think that the part that's most frustrating for me of all my European friends is still this a reluctance to be clear about who we're dealing with. I mean, the idea of that this is not a geopolitical issue, of course it is. This is all about the Kremlin wanting to make sure that it decides, makes the decisions for other sovereign countries, Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, and much the way that it had tried to do for so long over Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And so I think the Russians, or the Kremlin, only respect strength, they despise weakness, and the EU needs to, I think, be more firm. And frankly, German leadership is here, and we need to be more clear about who we're dealing with.
Speaking of German leadership, Ben, I think we all would agree that Germans tend to be rather cautious towards Russia and tend to forget that between Russia and Germany, there are still a lot of sovereign states who are our friends and allies. So I think we all would agree with that. Now we do have the enhanced forward presence of NATO. Ben, and I wonder, do you think that just its presence, its mere presence, could deter Putin from doing really crazy things like military intervention?
You mean the presence of NATO's enhanced forward presence battle group, like the one that's in Lithuania?
Yeah.
Well, this was a great example of German leadership after the NATO summit at Warsaw, when the alliance recognized that assurance of our allies on the eastern flank was not enough, that did not change Kremlin behavior, that we had to transition to deterrence, to have real capability. And one of the manifestations of this capability would be the deployment of these enhanced forward presence battle groups, each one being multinational, so that as the Kremlin looked over at Lithuania, they would see 5 or 6 different flags there represented, that they could not sort of avoid parts of NATO. And Germany, being the first country to say, we will lead this battle group, and also the Germans were the first to actually deploy. I think they arrived, Zigis, like in January of 2017. It was amazing how fast they got there. And that put pressure on all the other European countries, like, wow, if the Germans are doing it, we have to do it also. So that was important. But that will not prevent, that presence does not prevent the Kremlin from thinking whether or not they should use military force for some reason inside Belarus. I don't believe, unless they thought that the land corridor between Kaliningrad and Russia were going to be blocked somehow. I think that would be a different story. I do believe that the most likely time that the Kremlin might use force in Belarus was if it looked like a government was going to come into effect in Minsk that would be completely pro-Western and attempt to somehow break away from its relationship with Russia. That just doesn't seem very plausible at this point. But you can be sure that the Kremlin already has a narrative about NATO, these huge threatening NATO forces on the border, of 1,000. I mean, all the NATO soldiers in Eastern Europe would not fill up the stadium in Mainz where the Mainz football team plays. Okay, I mean, this is the numbers we're talking about, but the Russian narrative is that somehow we are threatening them. And of course, they will use any pretext to create a humanitarian crisis where they then have to go in and protect the poor Russians who were left behind at the end of the Cold War.
Ben, I would like to ask you another question later about the enhanced forward presence. I noticed that Jeroen was eager to say something. Jeroen, go on. What do you think? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think the question of German leadership is a very interesting one, and I think that this is this call comes at a good time in a way, because we're witnessing a very interesting moment in Germany's engagement in NATO, because it is transitioning into a new role now, and it is kind of figuring out what this new role will be. I thought maybe it's good to also zoom out a bit and see where we're coming from, because historically these calls for German leadership have not always been there. Quite the opposite, actually. There's always been a kind of implicit understanding historically that Germany's military or security ambitions should be contained somehow. Now that is of course very outdated now, and no longer relevant, because Germany is one of the most stable democracies in the world and is firmly embedded in the multilateral order. But there is that history, and right now there are more and more calls for that new leadership position. And what I think is interesting to think about is also what that leadership position will look like. And I think there are a lot of discussions right now, also in the strategic community in Germany, but especially also in connection with European security experts on what exactly that role should look like. And I thought it was interesting that the point that General Hodges brought up already about the role that Merkel could play there. I think the ambassador also referred to that. This combination of military and diplomatic efforts would be a very interesting role for Germany that would also match its political and economic status.
Mm-hmm. Ben, Sigis, let me ask Ben a question first, and then come back to you. Ben, what I'm interested in is you have always argued not only in military ways. You have said that we have to be, as societies, resilient against Russian narratives, around, against Russian propaganda activities in the social media, etc., etc. Do you think NATO is well equipped to deal with all that right now? I mean, we do have made some efforts, but is that enough?
So the alliance has responsibilities, but most of the issues, the threats to societies, that's the responsibility of the nations. So this is not something that NATO fixes. This is something that has to be done in Germany, in Lithuania, in Canada, in the United States, in Romania, to make sure. And when we talk about societal resilience, there's kind of two pieces. There's a legal, moral sort of aspect where people trust their government. They have a liberal democracy. They have a press, a media that is free and fair and can chase things down. They have an electoral process that is respected and seen as legitimate, and a judicial process. So that liberal democracy pillar is one part of it. The other pillar is the resilience of your infrastructure, the vulnerability to cyber, for example, or the capacity and capability of transportation infrastructure, and your power grid. These are national responsibilities. And by the way, I think that investment in those should also count towards 2%. This is just as important to defense as having Leopard tanks or tornadoes, because modern days Russia is most likely to use this kind of attack before they would use their own armored vehicles and Iskander missiles and so on, although it's the combination that makes them so dangerous. Now, I do think that
don't give the Germans an excuse not to spend more on their defense.
No, I'm trying to, I'm looking for a more sophisticated approach, because if I may say, as an American that lives here in beautiful Frankfurt in West End, I have gained a little bit of understanding for the domestic political environment. And in this coalition government, even if the chancellor woke up every morning saying we're going to get to 2%, it's never going to happen. So we have to have a more sophisticated approach to what does 2% mean. What would encourage Herr Scholz to be willing to spend more money, for example? And I think the alliance desperately needs much better transportation. We need cyber protection of the port of Hamburg, for example. I mean, these are critical for NATO.
Yeah. Interesting thoughts. Thank you for that input. Zigimantas, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I'm also, very much willing to say a few words on this German leadership. 15 years ago, I created Lithuanian-German Forum, already 15 years ago, trying to speak about that leadership that you should take. And just few areas where I think a lot can and must be done. First of all, just looking a bit from outside. Well, we have some issues now with America shifting its global policies. They will focus on China, that's for sure. I would say I have some difficulties right now with America not so much leading democracy agenda, freedom agenda, as we've been used in this region with Reagan and other great figures. Now UK is also departing. So from the person like me in Central Europe, those two countries, US and UK, that was always behind our freedom agenda. Our embassies was always operating in UK and Washington during the occupation. Now it's time for Germany to fill that gap. And as General, of course, and you, everybody mentioned this leadership of Germany in NATO forward presence in Lithuania. This is kind of a miracle that's happening, but this is an example that should inspire Germans to understand that your troops in this region, they create stability. They make millions of Lithuanians, and not only Lithuanians, happy, creating businesses and contributing to our regional security in the best way. So it should inspire you to continue. It should inspire you, of course, to get better defense spending. We are all here above 2% in the region. But not only this, I come back to democracy issue. If Americans are now busy with something else, and Brits and UK is doing something else as well with Brexit, what about democracy? Remember that Reagan, whose picture is behind me, he learned from German foundations. In Westminster speech in '82, when he declared that he will create National Endowment for Democracy, the National Republican Institute, and the National Democratic Institute, he learned it from German party foundations. Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, all other, your own foundation, and they were building this, democracies in Spain and Portugal before Reagan started to do it on a global scale, and it was successful. So what I want to say in Belarus, coming back to this issue, this is a chance for German democracy, not to say promotion, but helping democracy to be built in a way you build it all around. And few examples: Magnitsky legislation. In Baltics and in America and in UK and in Netherlands, we have a legislation that helps us to punish criminals beyond the borders, be it in Chechnya, be it in Russia, be it in everywhere, to include them into national lists. You don't have that legislation. Another little problem: in America and UK, you can punish not only by entry ban, but freezing the accounts. We don't have a global Magnitsky Act. Why don't we do it? Because all those regimes in Russia or in Belarus, they first of all steal money from people. It's about 100 of people that rule Russia and spends it in your wonderful Alps, in your resorts. But this is a stolen money. If you start hunting their money and destroying their vacation plans, they will immediately react, because they don't care about the country, they care just about its pocket. Yes. So why don't we hunt for those criminals? I will go further a bit. I will make you a bit nervous. With Nord Stream 2, what's happening here? I like American sanctions, to be honest, because I think it's knowing that Putin is killing people all around and using energy weapon to destroy our unity. Why do we have enriched Putin from his state enterprises? And why, Germans should pay 70% revenues that Putin will help, and he will fuel his own armies, and he will kill people all around with actually German money. I don't like that. I still remember meeting Chancellor Schröder and speaking about Nord Stream 1, saying, what do you do? Let's create common energy policy. And we still have a little difficulty about that. I will go even further. I mentioned this Astrovets nuclear power plant. It's our Lithuanian Nord Stream. It might explode. It's twice as close to Berlin as Chernobyl. It's built under the best Chernobyl practices. And Russians are now lobbying to sell the energy of Astrovets to the Baltic States. If they do it, they seal our synchronization of Baltic States with Western energy grid that we are trying to do. So, and okay, I will make you even more nervous. If you are serious about democracy, go back to EU and NATO enlargement. Why we should be victims of other agendas, why we should always react when Putin is marching with armies and then we think about the sanctions. If you believe in your democracy, why don't you support a Georgian nation that is baptized in 4th century, who are deeply European, and they were asking for map from 2008. I still remember Hillary Clinton in Chicago. I was sitting behind her back, and she said next NATO summit will be, of course, about map to Georgia. Where is it? I will also say about those association agreements with Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. We got this in 95, and we got it with membership promise. There is no stone in Lithuania that is not overturned because we had this big dream of membership. When you kill Soviet virus in your, when you kill all those oligarchs who make money with Putin, you need a vision to do it. You have strength that would mobilize the people. You don't have this vision for Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, because we, as Europeans, we are kind of shy in pushing our own agendas. And we are falling the victims of Putin's, Lukashenko's, and Chinese agendas. So what happened with us? We have 50%.
Zigis, I'm all the way with you. I'm all the way with you. And I can assure you that a lot of people in Germany are doubting the wiseness of Nord Stream 2, for example. It's being discussed here as well, and certainly in the international security community here in Germany. I'm quite at a loss of why Chancellor Merkel has supported that project for so long. It is not likely to change. So, and plus, there are other things like the NATO policy of not admitting countries with open border disputes, which would mean that if Putin really wants to keep Belarus out of the equation, he would start a conflict of some sort. So, thing is, if we offer Belarus something like that, it would assure a reaction of Putin. Don't you think so?
Well, I think this is exactly the German mistake. That is quite a tragic mistake that you made in Bucharest. So when you say like this, the natural reaction of Putin is you are inviting him to occupy countries. Because he knows that if he occupies some little territory in Georgia and Ukraine and Moldova, they will never move into EU and NATO, because this is exactly your reaction. So show different attitude. Yeah. And I will show it from my own history. In 93, in Copenhagen European Council, when Germany was still strong and strategic, dreaming about Europe whole and free together with Americans, you said clearly, Baltic States with free trade agreements will be EU member states. You know what happened with Russians? They just back off immediately. Exactly in that year, they withdraw troops from Lithuania. They started to negotiate with us. They started to notice us, because if you leave them do it, they will never treat those countries as normal. You have to show your strategy.
Sigis, that was in 1993. It was a different world then. The German strategic community and German politicians, I think, have come to a learning process, a accelerated learning process, only since the invasion of Crimea. And I would like to ask Ben a question now about enhanced forward presence and its usefulness. Philippe put that question. Philippe de Aumont posed that question. He said in 2015, also a long time ago, looking from now, a RAND report estimated that the Russian attack would likely overwhelm Estonia and Latvia within 60 hours and present the West with a fait accompli. Does the panel think that the tripwire enhanced forward presence in the Baltics is a sufficient deterrence to ensure strategic stability, or would a heavier presence be required? Ben, what do you say?
So, Philippe, thanks for the question. First of all, the RAND study was useful in that it got everybody's attention, but it had many problems with the assumptions and the factors that they considered, and they did not take into account so much work that had been done by Estonia and Latvia, as well as Lithuania, to improve their own defensive capabilities. So I don't believe that their finding was accurate, but certainly over a period of time, if there was nothing else there, Russia would have had enough force to overrun them. But 60 hours was not accurate. But set that aside. The alliance, I think, made the correct decision to deploy the enhanced forward presence battle groups. They're all multinational. And what's really impressive is that these multinational battle groups are integrated into the host nation brigade. So, for example, in Lithuania, the Iron Wolf Brigade, which I would say is on par with any other brigade in all of Europe, or an American brigade in terms of the quality and the readiness. And so the German battle group, German-led battle group, reports to the commander of the Lithuanian Iron Wolf Brigade. This is a real sophisticated professional way to do this. And of course, the commander of the of the Russian Western Military District can see this. So that's a significant improvement. I don't think that we need a larger force in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, but we do need significant improvement in two areas. We need air and missile defense for this region. Our Baltic allies, candidly, are too small to pay for something like Patriot or a larger system, although Lithuania did just purchase the NASAMS, which is a mid-level. I think this is where Germany and the Netherlands together could pick up the responsibility for the higher altitude air and missile defense, because Germany and Netherlands both have Patriot. They should extend that umbrella over the Baltic allies. The second area where we need more capability, not a bigger force, but is U.S. What we call enablers, logistics, intelligence, the things that are necessary to help facilitate rapid reinforcement. I think this would be the right improvement. The bigger area of contention, though, is not the Baltics. The Kremlin is not going to attack Lithuania, Latvia, or Estonia unless they see that NATO is not united. If they see us coming apart, if they see the United States not committed, if they see Germany not committed, then the risk goes up. But if the alliance stays together, which is why cohesion is the #1 priority for preventing an attack and a bad decision by the Russians, then I think it'll be okay. Where we have a bigger problem is in the Black Sea region. The Black Sea strategically is much more important to the Kremlin because the Black Sea gives them Sevastopol and Crimea, which is why they illegally annexed it to begin with. And this is the launching pad for all of their support for the Assad regime in Syria, which has put almost 4 million refugees on the road headed to Europe. And it also is what enables them to support General Haftar in Libya, which is probably going to generate another 1 million refugees across the Mediterranean into Europe. This is not an accident. This is not some unforeseen collateral damage. This is the weaponization of refugees by the Kremlin aimed at Europe to destabilize Europe. So while we have enhanced forward presence in the Baltic region, and it's correct, that was the right decision to prioritize that, but we have tailored forward presence in the Black Sea, which really means no forward presence. We need to have one coherent flank for the alliance with improved logistics, air and missile defense.
I see Jerome is also nodding his head. So you agree that we should take the model of enhanced presence and put it to more use for NATO?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more, and I think we should also complement it with certain other measures. I'm glad that General Hodges already brought up the capabilities. One thing that I think would also be really worth investing in is military mobility. So I think now what we've seen also with the past negotiations on the European Union multi-annual financial framework is that has been the post where there have been quite significant slashes in the budget, which I think is very bad because the military mobility is really an issue that should be addressed. And I hope that European countries will invest in that more. So that is also a very important issue, I think, next to the capabilities question.
Sigis, please.
Yeah, and I would completely agree with few previous speakers. And Ben, you are the best spokesman of the Baltic states, as always. But I would really encourage German leadership in making that presence a bit more robust, with air defenses, with some enablers from air and sea. But I would also add some other more sophisticated issues where we are quite strong. As you know, Baltics are quite strong with digital stuff and cyber security. For example, together with Americans, Ukrainians, Georgians, in Lithuania, we have a cyber security center because we are under cyber attacks every day. and we are trying to inspire the creation of some kind of EU-led cybersecurity force, where Germany also show some muscle. You have some little federal problems here. You don't have that, coordinating center like we have in our defense ministry. But why don't you fix it? Why don't we do it together at EU level? Because this is one of the areas that those attackers are using quite effectively.
I may have to visit your cybersecurity center in the next time. I will come back to you and talk to you about it, Sigis, certainly. Ben, what do you think? Cybersecurity, you said it must be addressed by the individual states, but isn't this exactly a thing where there's more room for NATO involvement and cooperation?
Yeah, sure. In fact, I would say that the alliance has, in fact, created structures and also a standard, like everybody should do these things. But the alliance has no forcing function. It can't make Germany spend more money on cyber, for example. It cannot make another nation spend more.
Yeah.
But it has a standard. And Lithuania, once again, is leading here. I learned 2 years ago on a trip to Vilnius, when the former deputy defense minister explained how all cybersecurity in Lithuania, even if it's for a school, a business, a resort area, everything is under the Ministry of Defense. So that, and they have the authority for a brief period of time that they can go in and stop the digital bleeding, if you will, if they see something, to immediately contain it. And all the money that's spent counts towards Lithuania's 2%. I went to Munich. I won't be more specific than this, but I spoke to a very senior official from the German Ministry of Interior, who has responsibility associated with cyber defense. I'll say it like that. And I asked him, I said, so who's responsible for the cyber protection of Munich airport? And he first said, and this is a good guy who gets it. He said, well, it's probably, since it's not a government airport, it's a commercial airport, so there's probably a vendor that provides the cyber. So right there, at least 2 red flags started waving. He didn't know. He used the word probably twice, and which meant that there was nobody from the Interior Ministry walking around with a clipboard, check, 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 to ensure compliance. And then I said, whoa, that worries me, because if there was a crisis, you might have American and Canadian and British soldiers flying into Munich airport. And if that was shut down, we would have a problem. And then he asked me, he said, are you going back to Frankfurt tomorrow? I said, yes. He says, I recommend that you take the train. So, I mean, the port of Hamburg and Bremerhaven, these are very important for NATO. For those German troops, the German soldiers that are in Pabrada and Lithuania, they will depend on reinforcements coming from Germany to get to Lithuania. But if the rail system is shut down by a cyber strike, then they are in a lot of trouble. So I think investment in cyber is a national responsibility, but it should meet alliance and EU standards.
Okay, there's lots to talk about still. We have 5 minutes left. I would like to address some questions that have been sent to us. Rebecca Hafner, for example, she says, thank you for the interesting discussion. If we are assuming that cohesion of NATO is key to deter Russia, how dangerous is the confrontation between Greece and Turkey, as they are both NATO members? A seemingly unrelated topic, but isn't she right? Isn't she damn right?
Sure, that's a terrific point. But keep in mind, every nation inside NATO has fought against at least 3 other members of NATO in the history. I mean, the United States has had not only 2 wars with Germany, we've had 2 wars with Great Britain. well, we're 0 for 1 against Canada. So the fact that actually Turkey and Greece are not at war is because of NATO. The fact that they are in an alliance with each other actually creates a framework that significantly reduces the possibility of a conflict. Now, I'm not excusing the behavior of either side. And I lived in Izmir for 2 years, and the chance of something happening is always there. But I think because of the alliance, it's less likely. And then finally, the cohesion. The United States needs to play a much better role on cohesion of the alliance to be that leader. That doesn't mean, of course, we have responsibilities and concerns about China, but without a strong European pillar, without a strong NATO, we do not have the capacity to deter Russia, fight China, which I think will happen in 5 years, and also provide security in the Middle East.
Sigis.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump to the first part of your question, because it's something that I wanted to tell to German audience. You know, in the Baltics, we are always puzzled with this German tendency of dialogue with Russia. What does that mean? It means dialogue with regimes. It means dialogue with the past that destroyed, you know, we are all called here the bloodlands of Europe because a lot of people are killed because of different kind of dialogues with regimes. Well, also remembering the Hitler and Stalin pact. What dialogue means for us is dialogue with the future, dialogue with democratic Russia, dialogue with democratic Belarus. Because in this way, the soft power of Germany, you know, your experience in building new societies, like in the Baltics, it's a huge success of American and German cooperation to support democracies. So please forget dialogue with regimes, because behind Putin and Lukashenko, you have China that is flexing muscles all around. They're also building that nuclear monster. They are already strengthening the grip. They are dividing Europe with this interesting format of 17 countries, trying to get the post-communist country into China's Russia grip. You know, and that's directed against German, even industrial interests, not to speak about democracy. Start dialogue with the future. It means with democratic Russians, democratic Belarusians, build strategically the vision for enlarged Europe, enlarged NATO, and you will get those enemies that are now dividing even Germany from inside and Europe from inside. You know, Brexit is also a little bit financed by Russia, and you will get the Europe together. But you should start.
I think you just answered the question of Patrick Kopetz, who asked, "What do you think of a EU-Russia summit on Belarus?" I would like to come to an end soon. A question that came to my mind was, as a German, of course, and I'm vacillating between being hopeful and being frustrated. Do you expect Germany to grow in a more able and willing and operational role in the next coming years? A short question from each one of you. I'll start with Jeroen.
Yes, a short answer, because I think we have 1 minute left. Yes, I think so, and that is because there is the internal drive for that, and there's also, it's being asked by partner countries to take up that role. So yes, the big question is, what will that operational role look like, and what kind of capabilities would they develop for that?
Thank you. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I sure hope so. It will take, no other country in Europe can influence Kremlin behavior. No other country in Europe can influence the behavior of the Chinese Communist Party. And it's because of Germany's economic power, but also the moral authority it has earned over the last 70 years. The brand made in Germany is respected everywhere, even by countries that may not love Germany, they respect it. And so Germany has benefited from the last 70 years. It has a responsibility to lead. And that means civilian leadership has got to be honest with people about the threats. And it also the civilian leadership should open a debate in German society about Germany's strategic role in the world?
Sigis, very short answer.
Okay, well, I remember the American president made his speech about Europe whole and free actually in Germany. But this is now for Germany to lead it, because this is just physics. You are already leading it, but you do not recognize it. You do not make it into strategies and visions. And we just need to complete creation of this happy German style, if you can say, European style Europe. You have millions of people waiting for your leadership. And believe me, well, you Lithuanians will lead EU in 27. If we work hard together with you, we might do it in EU, we might do it in NATO. And, you know, till the end of your life, you can simply say you change million, of people lives to the better, like you did it already in the Baltics, in Poland, in all Central Europe.
Thank you, gentlemen, all for this very, very interesting discussion. We couldn't answer all of the questions that have been posed, but we took up some of them. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Goodbye.
Thank you.